Hi guys, I hope you're all well and welcome to episode 138 of the James Layton Fitness Podcast. Now within this specific episode we'll be discussing, can you use intermittent fasting for fat loss or muscle building? We'll be discussing what intermittent fasting is and can you use it for fat loss or muscle building, or will it only be applicable within certain contexts? Let's firstly start off with what is intermittent fasting. So essentially intermittent fasting, all it is an eating protocol where you're having a fasting period during the day where you're not eating anything at all other than water, and then you're having a feeding window during the day where you're essentially going to consume all of your calories within that period of time. So typically what most people will follow will be a 16-hour fast and then an 8-hour feeding window. So some of the benefits, probably the biggest benefit, is because you're having a smaller eating window within the context of a fat loss phase, it makes it that much more difficult to go over your calorie targets, and therefore it just allows you to adhere to the fat loss phase more easily, because you're essentially having larger meals within that eating window because you've got all of your calories to consume within that period of time. It feels like you're eating more food than you actually are, and it can be a very good tool within the context of a fat loss phase. Now, having said that, it's really important to note that there's nothing magical about intermittent fasting. There's been a lot of hype within the fitness industry about intermittent fasting, but the evidence just is not there with regards to anything magical about intermittent fasting. We need to actually focus on the most important factor in the fat loss phase, which is creating the energy deficit needed for fat loss, burning more calories than we're consuming, focusing on that, and then making changes to nutritional training when your fat loss progress stalls. So therefore, feel free to use intermittent fasting within a fat loss phase, but make sure you're still focusing on creating the energy deficit. So for example, if you applied an intermittent fasting protocol, but you went over your calorie intake to the point where you were not within an energy deficit, you will not make fat loss progress. We need to make sure that the energy deficit is still our main focus, and then the intermittent fasting is just an eating protocol to help achieve that energy deficit. So don't get confused, don't think it's something magical and you can eat as many calories as you want within that 8-hour feeding window. You can't. You still need to be creating the energy deficit needed for fat loss. Now within the context of a fat loss phase, the only time that it may not be a useful tool will be for someone that trains early in the morning. Typically the feeding and fasting phase typically goes something like this. The individual will be having their feeding window from approximately 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. and then fasting the rest of the time. So because you'll be fasting during that morning period, if you were to perform your weight training session within this period, you could be in a position where you're going to lose a lot of strength and therefore muscle mass within the fat loss phase, because it's going to impede your gym performance. Because you haven't got any food inside you, you're not going to be able to perform as well. Your strength will not be the same as it would do if you had food inside you. Now if you're training in the evening, then you should be fine, because you should have enough time within that feeding window to have some calories before your training sessions. That might be the only time it won't be applicable if you're training early in the morning. Now with regards to muscle building, this wouldn't necessarily be optimal for muscle building. The reason why is, even though we're still focusing on daily nutrition targets to create the energy surplus needed for growth, we're also trying to maximize muscle protein synthesis, and therefore meal frequency is important in the muscle building phase. You want to have at least 3 protein doses relatively spaced out throughout the day to maximize muscle protein synthesis. So within that context, it would not be optimal for muscle building. But within that fat loss phase, if you're training later in the evening, feel free to apply the intermittent fasting protocol. Some of my clients use this and it works really well. As I mentioned, the main big benefit of intermittent fasting is it just makes it that much more difficult for you to go over your calorie targets. It's easier to adhere to those calorie targets for longer, therefore you can adhere to the diet for longer, and as a result you're getting better results because you're sticking with the diet for longer. So thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it. Like I said last week, we're getting closer to that 100,000 download mark, so I'm really excited on achieving that. We should be able to achieve that before the end of 2017. So if you've been an avid listener of the podcast, then thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. If you're still yet to subscribe to the podcast, please do. And if you're still yet to download my free ebook, How to Set Up a Nutrition Plan, if you go to James Layton, Layton fitness.co.uk, you'll see a tab at the top of the page called free ebook, and you can download that immediately. And that will teach you how to set daily nutrition targets suitable for fat loss or muscle building, and how to make changes when you reach fat loss or muscle building plateaus. I look forward to speaking to you next week. Thank you very much.